David Cochrane was inside the Oval Office as well when the Prime Minister and the President spoke. Went on perhaps a little longer than I expected, David, and the Prime Minister picked his spots to intervene. What did you make of how he did?
It was interesting, Rosie. From my vantage point, I was to the president's left, right behind the couch where J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, Howard Lutnick were sitting, and Stephen Miller, one of his advisors, and Susie Wiles, his chief of staff, and Caroline Levitt were all there. So I couldn't see the faces of the Americans beyond President Trump, but you could see all of the Canadian delegation, the ministers, the ambassador, the chief of staff to Prime Minister Carney were all there. And the level of physical discipline that they maintained throughout all of that was quite remarkable. Mark Carney reacted occasionally because obviously the cameras are on him. You could see him shift and change his facial expression. But Dominic LeBlanc, Melanie Joly, David McGuinty, very static. Would smile at the appropriate times, but did not have reactions to some of the, shall we say, interesting things that the president had to say. Because, while the tone of that meeting was very friendly, some of the things Donald Trump was saying were kind of menacing, right? Like even when he talked about the 51st state, saying it's only a matter of time. He looks at it like a real estate, transaction, which brought that moment from the Prime Minister when he said, as you would know, Mr. President, some things are not for sale. This being one of them, Buckingham Palace, making a reference, to two historic properties. But there was no signs of big movement there. I thought, Rosie, when he was asked, Donald Trump, is there something Mark Carney could say to get you to take tariffs out of Canada? He said no, and why not? He goes, that's just the way it is. We don't want you to make cars. It's going to be so uneconomical for you to make cars at some point. They'll have no points. But to do it in the United States, we don't want your steel, we don't want your aluminum. None of the things that Canada wants to see some movement and flexibility on, at least outwardly and verbally, there was no indication of flexibility and movement from the president. So while it started off very friendly with the praise, for Mark Carney as a person, for his great political win and taking some credit for his role in the political comeback, so as it went on, the language got into that sort of darker stuff that has Canadians anxious, with no clear signs that the president necessarily is looking for an off-ramp on any of those policies, at least in the public portion of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I thought what Frank McKenna's assessment there was, I don't know if you heard it, was that the president was respectful to Mark Carney. He wasn't particularly respectful to the facts and to the country. No. And I wonder how much of the conversation this afternoon has to be about trying to imprint upon the president and the people around him that some of the things he's saying simply aren't true, and that Canada is in fact needed for some of what the United States is doing. What do we know about how that meeting is going to unfold? Everyone's in the room. Everyone's going to be talking. Is there an agenda of any kind? And then I'll end on what the tone felt like in the Oval Office too.
I got to say, it felt kind of tense. I'm not going to lie. Like when I look at, normally when you're in a room with Canadian ministers on a foreign trip, there's nods and eye contact and little friendly, there's none of that. It was very, okay, we are in a world right now where we're in a room right now with the most unpredictable leader on the planet, certainly Democratic leader on the planet. And the stakes are in the billions. And as Frank McKenna pointed out, Rosie, like the $200 billion subsidy number that the president keeps quoting, it started at $100 billion, it went up to $250 billion, it's back to $200 billion. It kind of shifts. It's not accurate at all. But, it's something he keeps sort of like rubbing in the face of Canada and then talking about how we give you free military protection. We're going to do that anyway because you're right there. We'll look after you. But then he also referred to Justin Trudeau negatively, talking about Mark's predecessor, to quote the president, and then obliquely taking a shot at Chrystia Freeland as well, talking about that woman who worked for him and how terrible she was. So there was sort of a lack of respect overall to the Canadian government, to the aspirations of Canada to make cars, and live up to the negotiated trade arrangements. But where that meeting goes from now, I mean, that's going to be the real test. They're getting to the meeting. It's not like where things went sideways with President Zelensky. So Donald Trump did reference that at one point, and it got a big laugh from Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, who was sitting on the couch. The discipline of the Canadian delegation and the measured, interjections by the Prime Minister, I think the public portion of that went pretty well for Canada. the friendly tone of the president, even if what he said, the way he said it was friendly. What he said, though, was, as I said, kind of menacing and alarming. Yeah. It's a question of whether there can be any progress. It's hard to know from what the president says in a situation like this versus how things go in that private meeting. We're going to have to wait a couple hours before we hear from Mark Carney, when he speaks at the Canadian Embassy. And I suspect even then, Rosie, details, they'll be tightly held and a bit scant, perhaps, and where they go, unless there is something significant that does come out of this.
Yeah, and I would say, just given the things that the Prime Minister has said before, just being in a situation where you are in some ways negotiating in public, probably not his ideal situation either. So we'll see how this works behind closed doors.